It's 2018 and an all-new My Week is coming up. Our take on the biggest Michigan stories to watch for this new year. Plus, Nolan talks Macomb County corruption with Candace Miller. And Aaron Einhorn from Chalkbeat Detroit details the successes and the struggles of the Detroit Public Schools so far this year. Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson are back at the table. Join me. My Week starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015. It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
It's not. Happy 2018. Welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. We are glad that you are joining us for our first show of the new year, which means we have a lot to get to. Nolan, Stephen, and I will give our top 5 stories to watch for this year in Michigan. Plus, Nolan goes one-on-one with Macomb County Public Works Commissioner Candace Miller. She's pretty candid about corruption. We'll have that for you. And reporter Aaron Einhorn from our DJC partner Chalkbeat Detroit gives us some insight into how this year has gone so far for Detroit Public Schools. That is all coming up for you on the show. So let's welcome back to the big table our My Week contributors, Nolan Finley, the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and Stephen Henderson, host of Detroit Today on WDET Radio. Happy 2018, guys.
Happy New Year.
Cue the horns and the confetti, right?
There you go.
Though you have no New Year's resolutions. I read a grumpy column of yours that you said, I'm good the way I am.
I am now the hero of every old crank in America.
But you already were,
The voice
though,
of
Nolan.
cranky old men. No, it's like I wrote, my resolution is to accept my flab and my flaws and not worry about improving.
That's right. Didn't you say I am what I am? Just
I am what I am.
There
No
you
more-
go.
I think a lot
more
of people are in
trying
that
to
just.
improve.
I think a lot of people are in that just hang on mode right now. I thought a lot of people on New Year's Eve on Twitter and stuff were talking about no resolutions, just let me survive another 12 months.
Well, I think I'm trying to take the glasses half full. The 2018 is going to be a much better year than 2017. I'm going to throw that out there right now. And you
Maybe.
guys are giving me the hairy eyeball that I'm totally wrong.
It's started out good so far. Stock market is booming.
I know, what, at 25,000, eh? All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at what we think are going to be kind of the top 5 stories that people should be watching for in 2018. And you have to start with number 1. It's got to be politics, especially because of the political year we're in. The governor's race, you've got some seats in Congress open up, and you've got an interesting kind of crop of ballot proposals that we could see. I'm going to start with you, Nolan. What interests you most here?
Well, I think it's the most interesting election season I've seen in a long, long time in this state. There are no there's congressional elections and a Senate
race.
race. So yeah, it's the whole gamut. There's no presidential race this year, but still, for an off-year election, this thing is just jam-packed. Every single office in the state basically is going to be up, and control of the legislature will be at stake. Michigan will play a role in who controls Congress, because we got 3 open seats, and in this environment, they could go either way.
And I think you're seeing an interesting crop of what could be new players here in politics. Let me ask you, Stephen, about the governor's race, though. Do you think that we're going to see any other big name jump in the race, or are we pretty set with the candidates on both sides?
I don't know. I said in late December or late 2017 that I thought the field was unformed, and that you would see somebody else with a bigger profile on the Democratic side get in. Maybe Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, maybe Senator Gary Peters. I still think that's a possibility. I think it's getting late, though. If you're going to do it, you got to do it in the next 30 days or so. And I don't know that I see the momentum building in either of those camps to try to do that. I do know that the mayor's been out trying to find. He said he's trying to find somebody who's going to be
still
stronger.
Great dissatisfaction with Gretchen Whitmer amongst the Democratic establishment.
There's a big profile about her, though, talking about looking at her and more women running for office this year. So it's pretty interesting there.
So the Washington Post had a really interesting piece about women and the role they're going to play in 2018, and it focused almost exclusively on Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of the most flattering pieces I've ever seen written about her. It overlooked some drawbacks that she's had in terms of polls and things like that, but really talked about her stepping out and taking the lead on this. And really, she was one of the first people last year to do that. She was the first person into this race. She has been in it for 12 months, and even with the struggles, I think it's hard to say she's not the obvious front runner.
Well, she's the obvious front runner because
who's
she's the
in
only
there?
one there. But
Yeah.
I mean, she's not catching fire yet, and I think that's what's worrying folks like Duggan and others who believe this is a golden opportunity for Democrats to take the governorship.
Ballot proposals. We're looking at marijuana. We're looking at.
Redistricting, looking at prevailing wage, maybe minimum wage. I mean, it is going to be a big old.
Hello, turnout.
What year was that? Was that 12 or 14 that we had? It was 12 that we had as many as we did, and people didn't like that.
Everybody voted no.
They rejected all but one, I think it was, back then. So I think you always have to be careful about when is your time. What's the right circumstances in which you want to ask the voters to do something. I think the pot thing is in some trouble if it gets on the I do.
Why?
I think people are not certain about how that would all work. There hasn't been any sort of conversation about it. It's like, well, we're just going to legalize pot. You have all these conflicts between then state law and federal law. You have all of these regulations that then need to be put into place to manage how people do it.
Well, California's figuring it out right now, yeah.
And I think they broke the door open on this. California is a cultural trendsetter, a cultural leader. I think
you're going to see it on a large scale too.
They're doing it. They started doing it. They're trying to figure out all of the nuances of it. I think that will give Michigan voters some guideline going into November.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other big stories that we think are going to be happening in 2018. I put down immigration reform. I'm taking a look at the decisions that have been made with DACA. Yeah. And also we saw this week the federal judge coming out and saying, look, all of these Iraqis who have been detained, they deserve bond hearings now.
That's a huge
ICE is not very happy. They came out, they were not pleased, they said, with that ruling. So it is something that it definitely affects many people in Michigan.
Yeah, well, I mean, here you're talking about a dragnet operation to scoop up people who committed crimes, some of them quite minor, many, many years ago, decades ago, and to say that they were going to go back to a country where, for many of them, it would mean a death sentence, right? They're Iraqi Christians. The idea that you wouldn't give them hearings to be able to contest that is absolutely contrary to the constitutional protections that we have in this country, and that's what the judge said. I don't know why ICE is upset about it, other than that this checks their aggression, and I think the rest of us should be pretty happy about that.
All right, you want to weigh in on that real quick?
I think, DACA's up against a hard deadline. These Dreamer kids, that's up against a hard deadline. There's going to be some effort by Democrats to attach it to the budget deal. Yeah. The president wants to swap it for funding for a wall. I think DACA should be part of a broader, comprehensive immigration reform. We've got to figure immigration out. As predicted, if our economy keeps growing as the year has started, we're going to run out of workers if we don't fix our immigration process and start letting qualified workers in.
And in a note written to the president saying that he's got to make this decision in the next couple of weeks, because for all the systems to be kind of turned over in terms of DACA, we don't have as long as I think people had projected. Let me move on so we can get our last couple of points in here. Number 3, K through 12 progress in the state of Michigan. We're going to talk a little bit about DPS a little bit later on in the show, but just looking at achievement in the schools and what we should be doing staffing for the schools, accountability for the teachers, expansion of some schools. That's definitely something that's going to be in the forefront this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've always counseled on this that we need to sort of cool our jets a little bit in terms of constant change in the educational area. We do something for a couple of years, we decide that it's a disaster or that it's not working out the way we wanted it to, and then we switch to something else. I think this would be a great year to say,
We're going to stay the course.
let's enhance what we're doing where it makes sense instead of trying to go back to something else or junking it and starting over. And the instinct in Lansing always is to try to say, well, we got to start from the beginning and we got to go in a completely different direction. I don't think that has worked for us historically.
Nolan?
I think it all depends on whether Governor Rick Snyder is going to make this the absolute priority of his final year. When you ask him about education, he talks about job training and careers training. He doesn't seem to have the appetite to make the big moves you need to make to get Michigan started on on a comprehensive education reform strategy.
I think it's that he doesn't think he has the support, right? I think
Well,
his
it is his
instinct
last
would be
year,
to do
too.
it, but that he can't get the legislature to go along.
Number 4, we wrote down infrastructure and transit. See if what's going to happen with the RTA. And I'm going to skip to the last one. Number 5, the Amazon effect and taking a look at downtown development. And things are booming downtown. We will hear if we did land the Amazon campus. But what does that spur, even if we don't land that in Detroit?
Well, I think the process of applying for Amazon was very useful in that it did focus us on our strengths and weaknesses. You mentioned transit. That's our big weakness in drawing this next level of investment in Detroit. And if you don't get something on the ballot in 18, now you got to wait till 20. Now we're 3 years waiting and behind.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a few weeks ago, Nolan came to me and said he wanted to sit down with former Congresswoman, now Macomb County Public Works Commissioner Candace Miller, not just to talk infrastructure, but corruption. And so you guys sat down just a little bit before Christmas, Nolan, and had a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, she loves the job, which surprised me the most. I mean, she is right where she wants to be, and she's got a bone, and she's not going to let go of it. And that's the corruption that has been part of the county culture, particularly in the department she took over for a long time.
And she has some pretty interesting and detailed stories. Go ahead, take a look.
Candace Miller, in early 2016, announced that you were retiring from Congress. You surprised a lot of people. You had represented Macomb and St. Clair counties in the Congress for a long time, for 14 years.
Right.
And you announced you're giving it up voluntarily and coming back home. But your intent was never to come back home and sit in a rocking chair. You had a mission.
I did. I figured I had one more dance in me, so I wanted to do something right here in Macomb County.
And that something was cleaning up the county, and not just environmentally. You had long been aware of corruption in the Public Works Department, in the folks that ran it, and it was your mission when you came back home to clean it up.
Well, talking about cleaning it up, actually my slogan when I ran for this job was clean water, clean government. I thought that sort of said it all.
And people in Macomb County knew what you were talking about.
They knew what I was talking about. They sure did, because when you think about the water with beach closures and different kinds of sewage problems that we've had over the years, they knew all about that. It wasn't just a talking point. We live it. We've lived with it, and we're doing a lot now to clean that up. And then in regards to clean government, I mean, the kinds of things that happened here at the Public Works Office as far as pay to play were pretty much talked about openly.
People knew it.
For
You
decades.
knew it.
We all knew it. We all knew it was going on. It was always amazing that the FBI wasn't looking at some of these things earlier. So I'm delighted that they are now. I can't speak highly enough of the job that the FBI and the federal government is doing of investigating corruption in Macomb County, because unfortunately, they paint us all with the same broad brush, like everybody in Macomb County is corrupt.
Right.
That's not true at all. It was an anomaly here.
What sort of things did you find when you walked in the doors here? After defeating your predecessor, Anthony Morocco, who had been here 24 years.
Yeah, he was here for 24 years. You know, this is just a county job in Macomb County. The campaign was a $4 million campaign. That ought to tell you something, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's more than what you spend running for Congress. So there was some reason that people were spending that kind of money here. But anyway, I just said some of the things that I found is when an engineering firm tells you that they were forced to pay $10,000 to be able to have a contract with the Macomb County Public Works Commission. Department of Public Works and Macomb Township or Macomb Township, where Dino Bucci, who was the chief political operative here for 24 years, is also a trustee and has just recently had a 18 federal count indictment.
And he was the Morocco's #2 here for all practical purposes. How long did he last after you got sworn in?
About 15 minutes after I walked through the door. That was the very first thing that I did when I finally got the keys, because there was no transition. They were all told not to talk to us. And of course, we had the interceptor collapse going on and all this. Anyway,
Yeah.
the day I got the keys, I showed up here and he was standing there. I said, "Are you Dino Bucci?" Because I don't think I'd ever met him before. I said, "Come on down. You're my first order of business, bud." Boom.
So you got rid of him. But I mean, this really was some classic corruption here. I mean, in terms of pay to play,
It
and
totally
in terms
was.
of enriching public servants for doing their jobs.
There was a lot of, like I say, when you were having these contractors have to pay in order to get contracts here, that is so wrong, right? And in terms of having contracts, no bid contracts, and then you'd get the contract, and then all of a sudden, oh, you had a $500,000 project. Well, now it was $3 million because you had all these change orders going on. No bid. Now we bid everything out. We've said transparency and accountability are going to be the hallmark of our administration. So those are some of the big things, but even the culture here, some of the small things, really, where we had an entire crew of people, 3 people whose job it was to plow Dino Bucci's snow and his parents' snow and his brother's snow and other elected officials' snow and moving their girlfriends from one state to the next, and I mean, crazy stuff. You just
Man.
can't believe it. And now that particular crew is actually out cleaning out drains, which a novel concept.
That must be
That's
a
our
change of
job.
life for them, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, it's not their fault.
No,
They did what they were told.
So did you call in the feds, or were the feds already here investigating when you arrived?
The feds were already investigating. The feds were looking. Now, you hear a lot about
But you
this.
opened up the files here and said, take a look.
We said, just come in. I'll buy the coffee, okay? Here's every file that you want to look at. Come and take a look at it. And I think, though, what really happened is not so much the files here, because most of this stuff you wouldn't find in a file.
Right.
What happened, I think, is that many people who were previously intimidated or afraid. I mean, when I was running for this office, I wish I had a dime for every contractor that said, well, we can't support you because if you don't win, we will never get a job in Macomb County again. We'll never be able to get our permits. The first day that I walked in here was this huge conference table, and after I let Bucci go, I asked some of the guys down the hall, I said, would you come in here and take this conference table out of here? And they said, well, it's a beautiful conference table. You don't want to use it? I said, no, we're going to sell it on eBay or something, because if I had a dime for every contractor that told me they'd walk in to his office and say, here's your permits on this end of the conference table, and here's all the fundraising tickets on the other. I could have retired at that. And anyway, I just said, get it out of here. The optics of that are bad.
And you mentioned he would hold Christmas parties where contractors would just line up to come into his office and put the money on the desk.
Well, they had all kinds of gifts that they would give. And, you know, because I've had a number of the contractors, you know, talk, and I just said, listen, you want to send some cookies? Thank you, you know, that's fine, but you don't have to send gift cards. You don't have to bring boxes of wine. I don't even drink, you know. You don't just, that's done. But the stories are legend. Everybody talks about it very openly.
Love that. That was great, Nolan. I love that. I'll buy the coffee. Just come on in. Go ahead, take a look to the feds. Well, you know, we talked about the state of K-12 education in Michigan a little earlier on, but there is a lot of focus on Detroit Public Schools Community District. And one of our partners in the Detroit Journalism Cooperative is Chalkbeat Detroit. And reporter Aaron Einhorn has done a lot of stories on not only the leadership of new super Nikolai Vitti, but the expectations of teachers and administrators at struggling schools and how difficult it can be for parents to access better schools for their kids. But first, we took a look at the big picture, at the effectiveness of the district so far this school year.
There's definitely more of a feeling of hopefulness, I think, that we've had this year than we had had in the past. You know, years of emergency management, years of difficulty. The new superintendent, Dr. Vitti, has brought certainly a lot of confidence to the role that he's in. He has an air of competence. He's brought, I think most of the people who've met him, the people I talk to who've met him, who've heard him speak, come away generally feeling pretty positive about what he's going to do.
Do they feel that he's accessible to them more so than any of the emergency management has been before?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's everywhere, right? He does a lot of media, he does a lot of TV, he does a lot of radio, he does a lot of public events. He'll stay and take questions. He'll take a lot of questions. He gives kind of long answers, and I think for the most part, he's telling people what they do want to hear, which is, I'm going to expand programs. I'm going to expand art and music and robotics and gifted programs and AP programs and foreign language programs, like all this stuff that this district hasn't had in quite some time. That's fairly standard in more affluent school districts. The question's going to be, obviously, whether that's actually going to be able to happen.
So what have you been able to see so far from this first half of a year that he is going to be able to implement some of the things that he's telling parents, hang on, wait, this is what we want to be able to do?
I think there are some very serious challenges. I mean, so he says he can find the money in the budget to pay for things like arts and music because, a lot of things in the Detroit schools have been, purchasing was at the school level. And so by bringing some of the contracts, centralizing, creating efficiencies, you can find more money. But you can't create an art and music program unless you can hire enough arts and music teachers. So just funding the programs isn't enough. And the biggest challenges facing this district isn't just money. It's the teacher shortage, which has caused all kinds of serious problems. And Dr. Vitti, despite his best efforts, has so far not been able to address that. Now he's got some programs that he says are going to address it over time, but people are going to want to see change, and they're going to want to see change quickly. And I think he'd be the first to say that change is going to take some time before we see any real.
Well, especially at some of the schools that the state is now watching and saying that you have certain benchmarks that you have to achieve, or we're going to have to reassess the state of where the school is and maybe have to do something about it. What are those schools doing right now to try to change things?
Yeah, so there were 24 schools in the district that were put on a closure list last year and told, we're going to shut you down at the end of the year. And then there was a lot of political opposition. Those schools were allowed to stay open when they went into this state partnership program, in which they committed to meet certain benchmarks over the next 18 months, 3 years. And then an additional group of schools were put into that program more recently. So now it's like 50 schools, which is almost half the schools in the district. And they're in that program because they have had persistently low test scores, some of the lowest test scores in the state. So those schools need to bring those scores up, and they need to do so quickly in order to, continue. And that's really, really very difficult.
Well, that takes leadership from the principals who are in the building. But again, it goes back to teachers and making sure that you have the right amount of teachers in the classroom, but the ones that are qualified to be able to teach these kids at a level or meet them where they are right now.
Well, it's also important to note that, a lot of people will look at those schools and say, oh my gosh, 3% of kids are meeting state standards in their grade level. And they'll think, well, that school is terrible, nothing's happening in that school. But what they don't realize often is that kids come into the school, maybe, a fifth grader comes in reading at third grade level, and the teacher works with that child and works really hard with that child and brings that child up to fourth grade level, or say, fourth grade and a half, right? You get a year and a half of growth, but
it's still not fifth grade level.
It's still not fifth grade level, so that when that child takes the state exam, the MSTEP, that child's not going is essentially going to show up as though they didn't pass the test. And so schools, the Detroit schools in general, are really faced with having to do two really difficult things at the same time. They got to bring the kids up from where they were, and they have to teach grade level material. So you have to teach, say in a math class, you might have to teach whole numbers and fractions simultaneously so that they'll catch up from where they were, and be where they're supposed to be, and that's really very difficult. So I don't think anyone expects that, kids are going to start taking the exam, in a couple of months. I don't think there's any reason to think the scores will be appreciably different than they have been in the past. And so then people are going to say, well, to the superintendent, you're supposed to be this great hope. Why aren't we seeing change? And he's going to say patience. It's going to take time.
My entire interview with Erin at myweek.org, plus we have to link to Chalkbeat Detroit as part of the DJC. Nolan, she talked a lot about consistency and what we're going to have to continue to see from the district.
And processes. I mean, they just had to give back $6.5 million that they couldn't afford to give back to the state because of incompetent processes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
real quick.
that's what VD says surprised him when he came in, was that things are in that bad a shape after so many years of emergency management, which was supposed to fix it.
And we're going to continue to talk about DPSCD and, of course, schools in Michigan as the year goes on. And that's going to do it for My Week. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back next Thursday. But if you miss us before then, just go to myweek.org to see any of the shows that you might have missed, or tell us what's on your mind, Facebook and Twitter at My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next Thursday for My Week. Take care.
Did you know? Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago. In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, Craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.